Welcome, listener, to Chapter 3 of Bite-Sized Tales, the Flash Fiction audio podcast. This week we ask the question of what happens when you get lost in a story. So sit back and enjoy our tale, but try not to get too caught up in it.
The Lady of Lotus Lake. Written and read by Dot Moore. I stepped out of my apartment into the cold, misty air and jogged across the street. Naturally, it started drizzling the moment I left, but the library is only a couple blocks away. I shivered and hunched my shoulders, bracing myself from the early autumn chill. Droplets collected on my glasses. I removed them briefly to wipe the water away with the sleeve of my jacket. As I turned the corner, I nearly ran into a woman rushing past carrying a newspaper over her head. I didn't think it was raining nearly hard enough to warrant the cover. Maybe she just visited a salon. Maybe she was headed to an important meeting and needed to look her best. Who knows? I adjusted the strap of my purse across my chest and continued toward the library. Within a few minutes, as I approached the entrance, I could feel the dampness collecting across my shoulders. Maybe Newspaper Lady had the right idea. I pushed my way through the heavy wooden doors. The warmth and inviting smell of coffee, cinnamon pastries, and books flooded my senses. I closed my eyes momentarily at the comfort of this place, but the sound of my name snapped me back to reality. "Miss Vivian? Is everything all right?" I blinked and turned to see the librarian, Mrs. Hollis, walking towards me. She and I were fast friends. I needed the peace and tranquility of the library. She needed someone that would take her recommendations to heart. Most of our interactions were brief, but she extended kindness to me that I've lacked for some time now. I smiled quickly. "Good morning, Miss Hollis. I'm fine, just a little damp." I shrugged and adjusted my bag in an awkward attempt to feign indifference. She smirked sweetly before setting down the small stack of books she carried on the display table next to her. She closed the few steps between us and reached for my hand. Her wrinkled fingers were soft against my skin as she patted the top of my hand in a way that a proud grandmother or great-aunt might. She squinted at me through her smile and leaned in to whisper between us. "I have something to show you, Viv. You're the only person I truly trust with this." My brow furrowed and then raised in confusion. "Mrs. Hollis, you're not trying to initiate me into a cult, are you?" The older woman let out a raspy chuckle and clutched her chest. "Heavens, no, dear girl. What sort of librarian do you take me for?" I let out a soft laugh in turn as I hooked my arms with hers. "The kind of librarian that often leads my mind to the greatest of adventures." She beamed back at me, and her nose crinkled just enough that her small circular glasses slid down just so. I tilted my head and returned a quick smile. "So, what is it you'd like to show me, Mrs. Hollis?" She gave my arm a gentle squeeze and began leading me through the various shelves and bookcases, past the displays of new releases and book-to-film adaptations. She stopped as we rounded a corner to what I always assumed was a janitorial closet or perhaps an employee restroom. Mrs. Hollis pulled a small key from the pocket of her powder blue pants and inserted it into the door's keyhole, looking up at me with a wink as she did. Behind the door was an oasis of comfort. Large blankets draped across plush couches and lounge chairs framed the space. A quaintly decorated coffee table sat at the center of the room, and all four walls were stacked floor to ceiling with the most beautiful display of books I'd ever seen. My jaw fell open as I stepped through the doorway. I turned to face Mrs. Hollis with an expression of complete bewilderment. She smiled and nodded. "Vivian, this is Hollis Haven. My mother and I built this space after my great-grandfather left the library for us. It takes a very special person to be welcomed access to our private collection. And I knew from the moment I met you that you deserved to enjoy this room as I do." I turned to look around the room more. There was a small coffee cart with delicious homemade muffins and other treats displayed neatly. The books lining the room all seemed to be so much older, bound in worn leather and cloth. I looked back at Mrs. Hollis. Why me? What could I have done to deserve such a luxury, let alone something so personal to you? Mrs. Hollis clicked her tongue. Never you mind the why. I simply ask that you accept and enjoy. Take all the time you'd like. I'll come and check on you in a little while. She flexed her fingers in a cute wave at me as she closed the door behind her. I bit my lip in excitement and exhaled a deep breath before removing my purse and setting it on the coffee table. I took my time and browsed through the titles for what seemed like hours, not recognizing a single one of them. I finally decided to just grab at random and go on from there. The first book I pulled was bound in rosy pink leather with a lotus flower embossed at the top of the spine. I moved across the room to one of the couches, unfolded the blanket across the armrest, and settled in to begin reading. As soon as my eyes flitted across the first page, I felt myself fading, almost falling. But suddenly, I wasn't falling anymore. I tried to blink through the gauzy fabric now shrouding my face, only to see that, no, I wasn't falling. I was being carried. I looked up at the face staring down at me in shock. I scrambled to move the tulle dress from around my face in an attempt to settle myself. I looked around and recognized nothing except that I was no longer in the library. A man, clad in armor before me, bent at the waist and bowed as he introduced himself. I am Sir Warren, milady. My sincerest apologies if I frightened you. I thought you were in distress. No lass of your beauty should be wandering the marshes alone, nor at this hour. His words pushed the realization that I was currently standing calf-deep in water. I looked around once more, and my eyes darted to the scattered lotus flowers floating on the surface of the water. Like a zap of electricity, I understood what happened. I was now in the book. But how would I get out? A note from the author. This chapter was inspired by another prompt image, as most of my stories usually are. The image depicted a knight standing in a pond with floating lotus flowers smattered along the surface of the water, and in his arms was a woman in a thin gossamer dress. The artist added some graphics into the background of the image behind the woman's head that were supposed to, draw light into the artwork, but my immediate thought was that they were shaped vaguely like open books. The idea of this seemingly mundane character getting to experience something as magical as literally falling into a book just stuck out to me from that alone. I loved the journey the story took, and I hope you all do too. Thanks.
This chapter of Bite-Sized Tales has been brought to you under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Intro and outro music is Fantasy Motion by Alexander Nakarada, provided under a Creative Commons 4.0 license. If you've enjoyed what you heard today, we would greatly appreciate reviews and recommendations to your friends. Finally, for more information about our authors, visit bitesizedtales.com. We can't wait to read to you again next time.